It is the land of civilized kings. It has started in 5000 BC to 500,000 BC, and it is now the current-day Iraq. The Sumerian creation of religion can be found on a tablet in Nippur, an ancient Mesopotamian city around 5000 BC. Sumerian people created an advanced civilization with its own system of language, art, astronomy, and mathematics. Sumerian were probably the first people to write down their own beliefs, which were the inspiration for much of the Mesopotamian mythology, religion, and astrology.
On the flip side, death was another major component of the Sumerian way of life, because most of the living population believe in an afterlife, and for the Sumerians, the afterlife is the netherworld, which can be compared to hell. The netherworld is an underworld where the dead go after they die, and they enter through the graves, or if you want to enter the nether when you're alive, you can go through secret passages throughout the city. When you enter the nether, there are certain rules you need to abide by. Once you enter the netherworld, you cannot re-enter the real world.
This is the nether.
Crap.
He must not behave in a normal manner towards his family.
Hey man, what's up?
He must douse himself in good oil. He must not carry any weapons. He must not wear clean clothes. He must not make any noise.
Oh, hey.
And he must not wear sandals.
I got one question for you. What are those?
Sumerian religion is known to be polytheistic. It actually has hundreds of gods, but that would take hours to cover them all. So we've chosen a few of the most popular gods that were worshipped. Utu is the god of the sun, justice, law, and is the lord of truth. He is the son of Nana and is depicted with having a thorn helmet and carrying a jagged-edged sword. Ereshkigal is the goddess of the underworld, and she is known to symbolize the changing of seasons. Ninurta is the god of hunting and war, and he's sometimes portrayed as a scholar. He's often portrayed holding a bow and arrow. Ninhursag is the mother goddess to the mountains, and is known as a fertility goddess. She's often depicted with an omega symbol. Nana is the god of the moon, and the husband of Ningo. Inanna is the goddess of warfare, female fertility, and love, associated with rain and storms. Enki is the deity of crafts, mischief, water, in all forms, and creation, and he's often depicted as a double helix snake. Anu is the sky god, the god of heaven and the lord of constellations. He is the king of gods, spirits, and demons, and he is shown as a man with a royal tiara.
Ningal was the goddess of reeds, also the wife of Nana, who is the god of the moon. Here's some more interesting info about the Sumerian culture. First of all, there's a temple in the middle of each city. Each temple had a certain deity, or god, or goddess, which the town worshipped. Usually if terrible events occurred, it meant the god had deserted the town, and the town had to perform really complex rituals to try to get them back. In those temples, there's usually an abzu, which is a pool or basin for purification, sort of like a baptismal pond. There's also an Iditum, which was an inner chamber where the meals were had with a representation of the god. The representation was usually a statue of wood, and it was covered with jewels and leaves. Only priests and kings were allowed in. And the priests, they would perform sacred rites on platforms made of clay that were built right by the temple or the ziggurat. They usually did marriages and they performed rituals. And they did some marriages called hierogos gamos, which were sacred. They were between a human, usually the king, and a goddess representation. There was also something they did called substitution, which they would transfer a disease or something dangerous, or a curse even, to an animal or a figure made of clay. Ancestors of the living were treated like gods and goddesses in the household. I mean, I can see why. I love my dead grandparents too. But I wouldn't go as far as to, bury them beneath the floors of my house, consult them in times of hardship, and even worship them like gods. And you didn't think it could get weirder than that? They fed them. They stuck tubes in the floor and they fed them. And I would be scared of this happening. And that is probably the weirdest part of Sumerian culture.